The breaking point of a modern man. For many men, the true breaking point doesn't arrive with a dramatic collapse. It comes quietly. It slips into the small corners of everyday life. It shows up in mornings where getting out of bed feels heavier than it should. It reveals itself in the way thoughts drift, unfocused and scattered, as if the mind has forgotten how to hold a single direction. It hides behind the forced smiles at work, the quiet frustration when days feel wasted, the shame that grows every time a promise is broken, especially the promises made to oneself. That's where he found himself. Not broken, but worn down. Not ruined, but slowly unraveling. He wasn't a lazy man. He wasn't weak. He wasn't incompetent. He simply reached a point where his life felt like something happening to him, rather than something he was shaping. Each day blended into the next, predictable yet exhausting. His mind felt cluttered, filled with endless tasks, notifications, pressures, and noise. The weight wasn't physical, it was mental. A weight that didn't rest even when his body did. He felt like he was drifting. And drift, when left unchecked, becomes decline. There was a time when he had clarity. A time when he wanted to grow, to build something meaningful, to become someone he respected. But life's constant stream of distraction and comfort had pulled him away from that path. The routines dissolved. The discipline faded. The purpose blurred. What remained was a quiet sense of disappointment, not from others, but from within. Somewhere inside, he knew he was capable of more. Not in a competitive way, but in a deeply personal one. He missed the version of himself who used to try, who used to care, who used to commit. Now, he was living in survival mode. Doing the minimum. Hoping tomorrow would magically give him back the power he had slowly given away. The breaking point arrived on a day like any other. There was no crisis, no fight, no dramatic moment. He simply looked at his reflection and saw a man who didn't feel like himself anymore. A man who had lost the internal fire that once guided him. A man who had become numb, tired, mentally scattered, someone who reacted to life instead of directing it. That moment hit harder than any crisis could, because he realized he wasn't failing dramatically, he was fading quietly. And fading is more dangerous. He knew something needed to change. Not a small adjustment. Not a motivation boost. Not another temporary attempt. Something deep. Something structured. Something ancient enough to cut through the noise of modern life. Something brutal enough to challenge him, yet steady enough to guide him. Something like the Japanese 100-day rebuild a path, followed by warriors, monks, and craftsmen for centuries. A system built not for comfort, but for transformation. A system strong enough to rebuild a man from the inside out. He didn't know it yet, but this quiet breaking point was the beginning of his return. Why your life fell apart. Most men don't realize their life is falling apart until the symptoms become impossible to ignore. They see the exhaustion, the inconsistency, the anxiety, the lack of direction, but they don't see the deeper mechanics causing everything to crumble. They blame themselves for being unfocused, unmotivated, or weak, without understanding that the collapse didn't happen suddenly. It happened slowly, silently, through patterns they were never taught to recognize. The first cause was overstimulation. Modern life bombards the mind with more information in a single day than a samurai encountered in months. Notifications, messages, endless content, conversations, responsibilities. The brain is constantly processing, reacting, adjusting. When the mind is always on, it never gets the stillness it needs to restore clarity. Over time, overstimulation makes thinking foggy, emotions unstable, and purpose difficult to hold on to. It becomes impossible to hear your own thoughts, because everything else is louder. The second cause was scattered attention. Your attention is your greatest resource. But when it's divided into fragments, 10 seconds here, a minute there, no part of life gets the depth required to grow. Work feels rushed. Rest feels incomplete. Conversations feel shallow. Decisions feel stressful. The mind becomes like shattered glass. Light hits it, but nothing forms clearly. And without attention, discipline cannot exist. You cannot build a strong life with a distracted mind. Then came the erosion of habits. Not all at once, but piece by piece. You stopped waking up at the time you promised yourself. You let routines slide, just for today. You postponed the small tasks that once kept your life in order. Each missed habit didn't feel like much on its own, but habits form identity. And when habits decay, identity weakens. Soon, you no longer acted like the man you wanted to be. You acted like the man your environment shaped you into. And finally, the most painful cause, identity erosion. This doesn't happen loudly. It happens when you go long enough without keeping a promise to yourself. When your actions no longer match your intentions. When you live in survival mode instead of purpose. A man loses faith in himself quietly, gradually, almost imperceptibly until the day he looks at his life and wonders where the old version of him went. Your life didn't fall apart because you lacked ambition. It fell apart because the foundation holding everything together, your mind, your habits, your identity, slowly weakened under the weight of a modern world that pulls attention in every direction. Samurai didn't have perfect lives, but they had one advantage: clarity. Their environment supported their discipline instead of destroying it. Their culture built identity instead of scattering it. Their daily rituals protected their mind instead of overwhelming it. Your collapse was not failure. It was exposure. It revealed the invisible forces that were controlling you, draining you, and shaping your life without your awareness. And now that you understand why everything fell apart, you can finally understand how to rebuild slowly, powerfully, and intentionally in 100 days. The Japanese ideal of Hinkaku. In Japanese culture, there is a word that holds more weight than achievement, strength, or success. A word that shaped warriors, monks, craftsmen, and ordinary people alike. That word is Hinkaku, the dignity of character. Unlike modern ideas of confidence or status, Hinkaku does not depend on appearance, reputation, or accomplishments. It is an inner presence, a quiet integrity, a strength that comes from living in alignment with who you truly are. A man with Hinkaku does not need to announce himself. He does not need to prove his worth. He does not chase validation. His dignity radiates from the way he carries himself, the way he breathes, the way he makes decisions. Hinkaku is invisible to the eye but unmistakable to the heart. It is the foundation of true discipline. The discipline that does not rely on motivation or pressure, but on self-respect. This concept struck the character deeply. He realized that most of his suffering came from living out of alignment with himself. He felt the burden of inconsistency because he had broken agreements with his own identity. He felt shame not because he failed others, but because he failed to protect the dignity he once carried. Hinkaku showed him that rebuilding his life was not about becoming stronger on the outside. It was about restoring the quiet dignity within. Hinkaku begins with awareness. Awareness of your actions. Awareness of your thoughts. Awareness of your true values. It grows when a man faces himself honestly, not harshly, not judgmentally, but truthfully. Musashi embodied Hinkaku not through victory, but through introspection. He questioned his motives, his weaknesses, his habits, and transformed them with intention. His strength came from the dignity of knowing exactly who he was and who he refused to be. The character began sensing how he had lost his own dignity. Every time he delayed a task he knew he should do, his dignity weakened. Every time he escaped discomfort, instead of facing it, his dignity thinned. Every time he pretended to be fine while feeling internally fractured, his dignity fractured further. Not because he was weak, but because he had forgotten the ancient standard of Hinkaku. Rebuilding Hinkaku doesn't require perfection. It requires sincerity. It requires small, consistent acts that restore trust in oneself. It requires living with the quiet pride of someone who honors his own word. For the first time in years, the character realized he didn't need to reinvent himself. He needed to return to himself. He didn't need motivation, he needed dignity. He didn't need intensity, he needed alignment. He didn't need a new identity, he needed the authentic one he had abandoned. As he embraced the concept of Hinkaku, something shifted. He stood a little straighter. His breath deepened. His thoughts became calmer. He felt the first spark of inner dignity returning, not loud, not dramatic, but steady, ancient, and real. And in that moment, he understood something essential. The 100-day rebuild wasn't just about habits or discipline. It was about restoring the dignity of character. The quiet force that makes a man unshakable from the inside out. How Japanese warriors reset their lives. Long before modern self-improvement existed, Japanese warriors, monks, and craftsmen followed a method so powerful and so transformative that it became a quiet tradition passed through generations. The 100-day reset. It wasn't a motivational challenge. It wasn't a trend. It was a ritual, a structured, disciplined reshaping of life from the inside out. Whenever a warrior felt lost, unfocused, or weakened by life, he would begin a 100-day journey to rebuild himself. Samurai called this process keiko, disciplined practice over a fixed span of time. Monks called it ango, meaning a period of deep training and purification. Craftsmen, artists, and martial artists referred to it as hyakunin, a 100-day devotion to mastery. Despite the different names, the purpose was identical. Reset the mind, rebuild the body. Why 100 days? Because the ancient Japanese understood something modern men often forget. True transformation requires time, structure, and repetition, not intensity. 1 day changes nothing. 7 days changes little. 30 days can spark momentum, but 100 days reshapes identity. To a samurai, a 100-day cycle wasn't optional. It was the backbone of their training. If a warrior felt his mind becoming chaotic, if his discipline weakened, or if his purpose blurred, he would begin a structured cycle to restore what was lost. During these periods, he would wake at the same hour, perform the same rituals, meditate at the same times, train with unwavering consistency, and follow a clear set of rules without negotiation. Stability was created through repetition. Clarity was created through simplicity. Strength was created through endurance. The character found comfort in this ancient system. For the first time, he saw that his desire for structure wasn't a weakness. It was a very human need. The chaos in his life wasn't because he was incapable, but because he had no rhythm, no anchor, no framework to guide him. The samurai knew discipline wasn't built through random bursts of effort. It was built through a steady, predictable pattern the mind could trust. The 100-day reset also allowed warriors to break from the world temporarily, not physically, but mentally. It was a symbolic separation from old habits, old identities, and old patterns. Each day in the cycle acted like a stone laid carefully on a new path. At first, the stones felt unstable. But as more were added, the path became firm, straight, and unshakable. Monks used the same structure for spiritual awakening. Craftsmen used it to master their tools. Martial artists used it to refine their technique. The cycle worked across all disciplines because it worked across all minds. It carried the same message. You rebuild your life by building your days. You build your days by building your habits. And you build your habits by repeating them long enough that your identity begins to change. For the character, learning this was a relief. He didn't need a miracle. He didn't need perfection. He needed a structure, a 100-day commitment just like the warriors before him. Why 100 days works? The idea of committing to 100 days can feel overwhelming. Men who have failed many times before often fear long commitments. They fear slipping. They fear starting strong and collapsing halfway through. They fear that history will repeat itself, that they will once again prove to themselves that they can't stick to anything. But the power of the 100-day system lies in the opposite direction. It rewires the identity that created those past failures. Modern approaches to self-improvement rely heavily on willpower. They expect a man to force discipline each day without giving him the structure that makes discipline possible. Willpower is like a match. It burns bright, but it burns out quickly. The Japanese understood this, which is why they focused on systems, not motivation. The psychology behind 100 days is simple but profound. First, habit loops. Humans follow repeated patterns without realizing it. Most men live in loops of distraction, inconsistency, and avoidance. These loops are not moral failures, they are neurological grooves formed by years of repeated behavior. A 100-day cycle interrupts those grooves and replaces them with new ones. After enough repetition, what once felt difficult becomes natural. Second, identity change. This is the heart of transformation. People do not act according to their goals, they act according to their identity. A man who sees himself as inconsistent behaves inconsistently. A man who sees himself as disciplined behaves disciplined. The Japanese 100-day system doesn't aim to fix behavior. It aims to change identity through repeated action. When a man performs the same rituals daily, small, simple, predictable actions, the brain begins to form a new self-image. I am someone who shows up. I am someone who follows through. I am someone with structure. This shift is not forced. It unfolds naturally, like a quiet internal rising. Third, the psychology of time length. 30 days is enough to spark momentum, but too short to reshape identity. 60 days creates meaningful change, but the new patterns remain fragile. At around 90 days, the mind begins to fully adopt the new behaviors as normal. And 100 days completes the cycle, it seals the identity. This is why martial artists, monks, and samurai chose this number. Not for superstition, for psychological truth. Fourth, slow transformation. The modern man tries to change everything in 1 week and collapses. The Japanese approach teaches the opposite. Slow, steady, compassionate progress. Each day is not a challenge. Each day is a step. Each step is enough. This removes fear. This removes pressure. This removes the unrealistic expectation of perfection. And finally, 100 days works because you are not rebuilding your life. You are rebuilding yourself. And rebuilding yourself requires time, not force. The character, seeing this clearly, felt a sense of relief. He realized he didn't need to be strong enough for 100 days. He only needed to be present for 1 day, repeated 100 times. The character commits to 100 days. The decision didn't arrive with confidence. It didn't arrive with a surge of motivation or a dramatic declaration. It arrived quietly, the way most important decisions do. He sat alone in his room, the evening light fading across the floor, feeling the weight of his life resting on his shoulders. The noise in his mind had not disappeared. The doubts were still there. And the fear of failing again pressed against his chest. But underneath all of that was a softer feeling, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not loud, not overwhelming, not guaranteed. A small spark. Fragile, but real. He thought about everything he had learned so far, how samurai rebuilt themselves through structured cycles, how the mind weakens through overstimulation, how identity is shaped through repetition, how the 100-day system was designed not for perfect men, but for imperfect ones trying to rise. And for the first time, he believed there might be a path he could actually follow. He wasn't confident he could do it, but he was confident he needed to try. He stood up and walked to the mirror, not to judge himself, but to acknowledge the man who was about to begin again. He didn't see strength yet. He didn't see discipline. He didn't see a warrior. He saw someone tired, someone uncertain, someone afraid of failure, but someone still willing to take a step. In that honesty, he felt the first hint of dignity returning. Hinkaku. The quiet dignity of someone who refuses to give up on himself. He took out a notebook and wrote the words. Day 1. The simplicity of it made his heart tighten. He had written things like this before: goals, plans, schedules, only to watch them collapse under the weight of inconsistency. Part of him feared this would be the same. Part of him whispered that he would fail again. Part of him wanted to delay. To start tomorrow instead of today. But he remembered Musashi's rule. The moment you begin is the moment you commit. So he began. He wrote down 3 simple rituals for the morning. 3 tasks for the day. 3 habits to avoid. Nothing complicated. Nothing extreme. Just a framework, the beginning of the 100-day structure. His hands trembled slightly as he wrote. Not from fear, but from the vulnerability of trying again. It takes strength to rebuild a life. But it takes even greater strength to admit you need rebuilding. He felt both exposed and empowered. The commitment wasn't loud, but it was sincere. Then he made a promise, not out loud, not with drama, but internally, with quiet clarity. For the next 100 days, I will show up even when I'm tired, even when I'm afraid, even when I slip. I will show up. This was the moment his life shifted. Not because he became stronger instantly, but because he finally chose a path designed to guide him step by step. With fear in his chest, doubt in his mind, and hope in his heart, he took his first step into the 100-day journey. The brutal Japanese rule of subtraction. Before a warrior can build strength, he must clear the ground beneath him. Samurai understood that if the mind is cluttered, discipline becomes impossible. If the spirit is noisy, clarity cannot enter. And if a man tries to add new habits onto a chaotic foundation, everything collapses under its own weight. This is why the first phase of the 100-day Japanese rebuild begins not with addition, but with subtraction, the brutal removal of everything that drains, distracts, or dilutes the mind. Modern men believe their problem is a lack of action. But in truth, the problem is too much of everything. Too much noise. Too much stimulation. Too many choices. Too many digital pulls. Too many mental tabs open at once. The Japanese understood this long before smartphones existed. Their philosophy was simple. Remove what weakens you before you add what strengthens you. The character learned this on day 1. He expected to begin the journey with intense training, new routines, and challenging tasks. Instead, the first instruction he followed was this: cut away the unnecessary. Not forever, just for the first 10 days. Just long enough to give his mind space to breathe again. He began with the most obvious distractions. He reduced digital noise, no mindless scrolling, no endless content. He eliminated the small habits that drained time. Checking messages constantly, browsing without intention, reaching for stimulation the moment silence appeared. He simplified his environment, clearing clutter from the desk where he worked, the corner where he trained, the space where he rested. Then he removed hidden distractions, the ones he didn't even notice were shaping his behavior. He stopped multitasking. He stopped jumping from task to task. He stopped trying to consume information constantly. Each subtraction felt strange at first, almost uncomfortable, because his mind had grown addicted to stimulation. But with each removal, something shifted. The noise began to soften. The Japanese call this early stage shodoku purification. Not spiritual, not ceremonial, psychological. Removing everything that pulls the mind away from presence. The character felt the brutal simplicity of this rule. For the first time in years, there were moments of silence. Moments where his thoughts weren't running. Moments where he could feel himself breathing again. This wasn't easy. The mind resisted silence. Boredom appeared. Restlessness surfaced. The urge to check his phone or distract himself rose like a wave. But instead of giving in, he watched the urges pass, the way a monk watches thoughts float by during meditation. He started to understand something ancient. Before strength is added, weakness must be removed. Before discipline is built, distraction must die. Before identity is rebuilt, noise must fade. The rule of subtraction felt brutal. But it was exactly what his overstimulated mind needed. And as the days continued, the empty space he created would become the ground on which he built an entirely new life. The ritual of Cho-rei, morning purification. The first 10 days of the 100-day rebuild demand one simple truth. The way you begin your day becomes the way you live your life. Japanese warriors understood this intuitively. Monks lived by it. Craftsmen embodied it. Their mornings were not rushed, chaotic, or drowned in noise. They were deliberate, silent, and purifying. They followed a ritual known as Cho-rei, a practice designed to cleanse not the body, but the mind. For years, the character's mornings had been a battlefield. He woke up late, already feeling behind. His mind flooded with thoughts before he even stood up. Notifications awaited him. Responsibilities pressed against his chest. Every morning began with noise, and the noise followed him through the rest of the day. He never had a chance to reset. He only reacted. But on day 2 of the 100-day rebuild, he began something new. Something slow. Something quiet. Something ancient. Cho-rei. The ritual was simple, but powerful. It started with standing still. Not stretching, not rushing, not grabbing the phone. Just standing. Feeling his breath. Feeling the weight of his body. Feeling the world before entering it. This alone softened the tension that usually filled his mornings. Next was cleansing. He washed his face with cold water, not for hygiene, but for awakening. Samurai used cold water to sharpen attention, to bring the mind back to the body, to signal that a new day had begun. The shock of cold wasn't punishment. It was renewal. It reminded him that today was not yesterday. Today was fresh, clean, unmarked. Then came breathing. Slow, deep, controlled. He inhaled as if he were drawing in steadiness. He exhaled as if releasing the debris of yesterday. Japanese monks used this breath not to escape reality, but to fully enter it. Breathing became a form of presence, a way to align mind, body, and intention before the day could pull them apart. After breathing, he practiced silent observation. He sat for just a few minutes, letting thoughts pass like drifting clouds. No judgment, no urgency, no resistance. This wasn't meditation in the modern sense. It was mental alignment. It gave him a taste of stillness, something he hadn't felt in years. Finally, Cho-rei ended with one clear intention. Not a list. Not goals. Not pressure. Just one sentence written in his notebook. Today, I will show up. That was enough. As he practiced Cho-rei each morning, something subtle changed. He no longer woke up feeling chaotic. His first thoughts were no longer frantic. His mornings became a sanctuary instead of a sprint. The ritual didn't solve his problems, it made him strong enough to face them. Japanese warriors believed that the man you are in the morning becomes the man you are in battle. The character finally understood why. Cho-rei didn't just clean his mind. It steadied his spirit. And that steadiness would become the foundation of the next 100 days. The first internal shift. Real change rarely announces itself with dramatic emotion. It doesn't arrive as a sudden burst of motivation or a life-altering epiphany. More often, it comes quietly, so quietly, that a man almost misses it. And that's exactly how the character felt the first internal shift of his 100-day journey. Not as a breakthrough, not as a victory, but as a faint, steadying presence he hadn't felt in years. It happened on the morning of day 4. He had just finished the Cho-rei ritual, standing still, breathing, cleansing, writing his intention when he noticed something unexpected. The sense of rushing that usually followed him everywhere wasn't there. The frantic impulse to check his phone was muted. The heaviness that usually wrapped around his thoughts felt lighter. almost distant. For the first time in a long time, the morning didn't feel like a battle he was losing. He sat down at his desk and realized his mind wasn't jumping between tasks. There was space. There was quiet. There was clarity. It wasn't perfect. His thoughts still wandered. His emotions still flickered. But something fundamental had shifted beneath the surface like sediment settling at the bottom of a river. His mind wasn't clean, but it was calmer. The noise wasn't gone, but it no longer owned him. This was the first internal win. He didn't celebrate it loudly. He didn't even fully understand it. He just felt it, a soft, grounded sensation in the center of his chest. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, this 100-day journey was working. He wasn't disciplined yet. He wasn't transformed. But he felt in control of his presence for the first time in years. As the day continued, he noticed more of these small shifts. His breathing stayed steady, even when he felt stressed. His attention didn't scatter the moment he tried to focus. His urge to escape into distraction weakened, just slightly. He felt more aware of his thoughts, instead of drowning in them. He reacted slower, calmer, with more intention. These were tiny changes, almost invisible on the surface, but internally, they meant everything. Because small shifts like these are the early signs of a mind learning how to quiet itself. He realized something important. The goal of the first 10 days wasn't to become disciplined. It wasn't to become productive or strong. It was simply to reclaim the space inside his own head, to give his mind room to breathe, to remove the noise that had been suffocating him. That afternoon, while walking outside, he noticed a strange sensation, peace. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, but real. The world felt slower. His steps felt grounded. His thoughts felt lighter. He wasn't floating or euphoric. He was simply present. And that presence made him feel hopeful in a way he couldn't explain. This was the first internal shift. Not a transformation, not a triumph, but a whisper. A quiet promise that rebuilding his life was truly possible. It was the kind of subtle change only a man on the right path can feel. And it marked the true beginning of his 100-day journey, creating the warrior's daily structure. Structure is often misunderstood. Many men see it as restriction, a cage, a set of rules that limits freedom. They resist routines because they associate them with pressure, burnout, or the fear of failing again. But the Japanese warrior saw structure differently. To him, structure wasn't a prison. It was liberation. It was the container that protected his mind from chaos. It was the path that carried him forward, even on days when his willpower was weak. In the second phase of the 100-day rebuild, the character learned this truth firsthand. By day 10, the noise in his mind had begun to soften. The subtraction phase had cleared enough space for something new to enter. Now, he needed a system, not a strict schedule, not a set of overwhelming rules, but a daily rhythm he could return to without thought. Japanese monks call this rhythm jo, disciplined, daily movement that creates inner stability. He started with the simplest structure possible. Morning, day, evening, 3 pillars that could hold the weight of his life. Morning, a predictable ritual of awakening. Chorei, breath work, a few minutes of stillness, a deliberate intention. This wasn't about productivity. It was about alignment. He learned that when the first hour of the day is structured, the rest of the day feels manageable. Daytime, a focused block of intentional action. Not 10 tasks, not overwhelming lists. Just one primary daily commitment, the warrior's task. Samurai had a similar concept. Focus on the essential, perform it fully, and let everything else follow. With this structure, he no longer drifted through the day reacting to impulses. He moved through it, guided by a single, anchored point of purpose. Evening. A gentle wind down. He introduced a simple closing ritual. Reflecting on the day, acknowledging one win, releasing one frustration. This practice was taken from Japanese monks who close each day with seiza, a moment of quiet sitting to let the mind settle before rest. It wasn't dramatic, but it created closure. It told his nervous system, the day is done. Each pillar became a form of internal architecture. Not strict, not rigid, just present. As he followed this structure, he noticed something surprising. He felt lighter. Structure didn't take freedom away. It gave it back. For the first time in years, his day didn't feel like a chaotic stream of reactions. It felt like a path, steady, repeatable, soothing. The structure also lowered the emotional pressure he carried. He didn't have to wonder what he should do next. He didn't have to rely on motivation. He didn't have to negotiate with himself. The system made the decisions for him. All he had to do was follow the rhythm. The Japanese understood that a man is not strong because he is disciplined. A man becomes disciplined because his structure is strong. By the end of this phase, the character realized something profound. Structure wasn't the enemy. His lack of structure was. And now, for the first time in a long time, he had a foundation solid enough to build on. Shingi-tai. Mind technique. Body alignment. In Japanese martial traditions, there is a principle so fundamental that entire schools were built around it. Samurai, monks, and masters of every discipline believed that true transformation only occurs when three elements move as one: shin, gi, tai. The mind, the technique, and the body. Without alignment between these three, a man remains fragmented. But when they unify, he becomes whole, stable, and unshakable. For most of his life, the character lived with these three elements, disconnected. His mind wanted change, but his body felt heavy and unmotivated. His body sometimes moved, but without technique or structure, the effort collapsed quickly. And even when he tried to follow techniques or advice, his mind wasn't steady enough to sustain them. Like many modern men, he lived in pieces rather than as a unified whole. Shingi-tai offered him a new understanding. Shin, the mind. This is where intention lives. Shin is clarity, awareness, presence, and inner truth. Without shin, discipline becomes punishment, and effort feels forced. Samurai trained their minds before they touched a sword because they knew a chaotic mind creates chaotic actions. Shin is the internal compass, the quiet knowing of what must be done. Gi, the technique. This is action. Not grand, impressive action, but precise, consistent, refined movement. Gi is the system, the method, the structure. It is the way a man channels shin into the world. Even the greatest intention means nothing without technique. Gi is how a warrior expresses his inner state through deliberate practice. Tai, the body. This is the vessel. The body carries discipline, absorbs stress, and endures discomfort. It communicates the truth of the mind more honestly than words ever can. If the body is weak, tired, or overstimulated, the mind struggles to anchor itself. Tai is the physical foundation upon which everything else rests. The character realized something important. He had been trying to rebuild his life by addressing only one piece at a time. He tried fixing his mind without moving his body. He tried changing his body without stabilizing his mind. He tried learning new techniques without grounding either one. This fragmented approach created inconsistency. But Shingi-tai offered a unified path. He began aligning the three. Shin. He started the day with cho-rei stillness, intention, breath. Gi. He followed a simple, repeatable daily structure, the warrior's rhythm. Tai. He trained his body gently but consistently, grounding strength in movement. At first, the alignment felt subtle. But as days passed, he noticed everything becoming smoother. His mind didn't resist discipline as much. His body didn't feel as heavy. His actions felt clearer, more natural, less forced. He wasn't fighting himself anymore. The pieces were finally working together. Shingitai wasn't about perfection. It was about integration. It was about becoming one person instead of three disconnected selves. And as he aligned mind, technique, and body, he felt something powerful rising within him. The first signs of a new identity taking shape, not through force, but through harmony. The character begins to stabilize. Stability didn't rush into his life. It arrived gradually, in small waves almost too subtle to notice at first. But as the days passed, the character realized something had begun shifting inside him. For the first time in years, he was experiencing consistency. Not perfect consistency, not dramatic progress, but a steady rhythm, growing quietly beneath the surface. Around day 14, he noticed the first clear sign. He woke up, and without thinking, his body moved into the Chorei ritual. No resistance, no negotiation, no internal argument about whether he felt like it. It simply happened. This was new. In the past, every attempt at discipline came with a mental battle. But now, the structure he built was carrying him forward, even on days when his motivation was low. It wasn't just that he could follow his routine. It was that he was following it, naturally, gently, consistently. The stability wasn't loud. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like alignment. He noticed it again during the afternoon, warrior's task. There was no rush, no frantic switching between tasks, no scattered thoughts pulling him away. His attention stayed with what he was doing. He finished things without stopping halfway. He no longer needed stimulation to push through discomfort. His mind felt anchored. What surprised him most was how peaceful this new rhythm felt. Stability wasn't boring. It was comforting. It felt like returning to a long-lost home inside himself. Each day built on the last. Small habits that once felt impossible began to feel normal. Breathing practices became easier. Physical training felt more energizing. His thoughts were still present, but they floated with less intensity. He didn't spiral as easily. He didn't collapse under pressure the way he used to. This wasn't the dramatic transformation he once imagined. It was something better. It was reliability. And reliability slowly created something he never expected. Self-trust. He started trusting himself to follow through, trusting himself to stay present, trusting himself to handle discomfort without running. Each day completed was a quiet message to his subconscious. You can do this. In moments of doubt, he reminded himself of the small wins, the mornings he didn't skip, the tasks he completed, the urges he resisted, the discipline he maintained even when motivation was absent. Bit by bit, the identity he lost was returning not as a memory, but as a lived reality. Around day 20, something else shifted. People around him noticed. Someone at work commented that he seemed more focused. A friend mentioned that he felt different, calmer, more grounded, more present. These weren't compliments he chased, but they confirmed the internal change he already sensed. The foundation of stability had begun forming, stone by stone. He wasn't transformed yet. He wasn't unbreakable. But he was steady in a way he hadn't been in years. And that steadiness became the bridge between who he had been and who he was becoming. Karada no kurikeishi. Repetition of the body. By the time he reached day 30, the journey had shifted into a new phase, the middle grind. This is the part most men fear, because it has none of the excitement of beginning and none of the reward of finishing. It is the quiet, steady middle, where repetition becomes the true teacher. And in Japanese tradition, this phase has a name: Karada no kurikeishi, the repetition of the body. To the modern mind, repetition sounds boring, even pointless. Men today crave novelty, stimulation, new challenges, new information. Anything repetitive feels like stagnation. But to the Japanese masters, repetition was the secret engine of transformation. It was the path through which the body learned what the mind could not express, the method by which discipline became instinct, They believed the body must repeat an action so many times that it becomes part of who you are. Not something you think about, but something you are. This is where the character now found himself. Every morning, he repeated the same routine: cho-rei, breath, stillness, intention. Every afternoon, he faced the warrior's task slow, focused, consistent. Every evening, he closed the day with reflection and release. For weeks, these actions remained the same. But something surprising happened. The repetition didn't feel boring, it felt stabilizing. The predictability soothed his nervous system. The familiarity reduced resistance. The rhythm gave his mind something to trust. In the beginning, he had to force himself through each step. By day 30, his body started leading the way. This is the essence of Karada no Kurikeishi. The body learns through doing. The mind learns through repeating. The spirit learns through enduring. Samurai trained the same cuts thousands of times, not because they were slow students, but because they knew mastery only emerges through deep embodiment. Zen monks repeated the same bows, the same steps, the same breaths, until presence became second nature. Craftsmen shaped tools with the same motions until their muscles understood the work intuitively. Repetition is not sameness. Repetition is refinement. The character began to experience this. Actions that once felt mechanical started to feel natural. Breathing became smoother. Focus arrived easier. Distractions lost their power. Even physical movements felt different, more grounded, more intentional, less forced. He realized something profound. The middle grind wasn't about effort. It was about surrender. Surrendering to the process. Surrendering to consistency. Surrendering to the quiet wisdom that comes from doing the same small things well. For the first time in his life, he understood why the Japanese placed such high value on the mundane. The power wasn't in variety. The power was in depth, going so deep into simple actions that they reshaped the person performing them. Karada no Kurikeishi wasn't glamorous. It wasn't exciting. But it was working. And as the days passed, he stopped fearing boredom. Because he realized boredom wasn't the enemy. Inconsistency was. Through repetition, he wasn't just training his body. He was carving discipline into his identity. Mushin. Acting without overthinking. There is a moment in every warrior's training when thinking becomes the obstacle. Not because thought is bad, but because thought slows action, divides attention, and interrupts flow. The Japanese called this interference the second mind. The mind that hesitates, questions, doubts, analyzes, and gets in its own way. To overcome it, samurai sought a state known as mushin, no mind. Not an empty mind, not a numb mind, but a mind free from unnecessary thought. By day 40, the character began to feel the first hints of mushin entering his life. It happened in small ways. A task that once required effort happened smoothly. A lingering hesitation disappeared before it had time to form. Moments that used to send him into spirals of overthinking now passed like clouds drifting across a quiet sky. He didn't force this state, it emerged naturally from repetition, from presence, from the structure he had been building. Mushin is not about stopping thought. It is about not clinging to thought. Samurai practiced mushin because overthinking in battle was fatal. But modern men suffer in different battles. Hesitation before simple tasks. Fear before decisions. Paralysis before responsibilities. In these moments, overthinking is not fatal, but it is draining. It steals energy, confidence, and momentum. Mushin restores all three. The character first noticed the shift while doing something ordinary, cleaning his desk. Normally, he would think about the best way to do it, worry about how long it would take, or distract himself midway. But on this day, the action unfolded naturally. No hesitation, no debate, no friction. His hands moved before his doubts could form. His body acted before his mind, complicated things. It felt peaceful. Later, during his training, the same thing happened. He moved with a rhythm he didn't overanalyze. His breath synced with his steps. His focus remained in the moment, not jumping ahead or drifting behind. It wasn't a perfect flow, but it was real, a soft entry into Mushin. This state gave him something he had craved for years: relief. Relief from the weight of thinking too much. Relief from the inner voice that questioned everything. Relief from the exhaustion of living inside an overactive mind. Mushin taught him to trust his training, to trust his structure, to trust himself. The Japanese believed that when a man repeats actions with sincerity, his body becomes wiser than his thoughts. And the character began to see the truth in that. His body knew what to do. His mind, now quieter, let it happen. This didn't mean he stopped thinking in life. It meant he stopped interrupting himself. Tasks felt lighter. Decisions felt clearer. Actions felt smoother. He wasn't faster because he was rushing. He was faster because he wasn't fighting himself anymore. This was Mushin, not a dramatic enlightenment, but a subtle shift. A calm mind. A steady presence. An action that flows without internal resistance. And once he tasted it, even for a moment, he knew. The second half of the journey would be built on this new way of moving. The first big setback. Every true journey has a moment when the path breaks. A day when discipline slips, motivation fades, and the progress that once felt solid suddenly feels fragile again. For the character, this moment arrived around day 47, unexpectedly, quietly, almost invisibly. There was no dramatic crisis. Just a long, draining day that took more from him than he realized. He woke up late. He skipped Chorei. He avoided his warrior's task, just for a moment. He told himself he'd catch up later. But later never came. Old habits returned like shadows, familiar, tempting, comfortable. He scrolled without thinking. He procrastinated without meaning to. He drifted through the day in a fog of guilt and frustration. By evening, the shame settled in. He felt like he had thrown away everything: the structure, the progress, the stability he worked so hard to build. He feared this moment more than anything else, because in the past, one failure always led to collapse. One slip became a week became a month became a version of himself he didn't want to return to. He sat on his bed, staring at the floor, feeling the familiar weight of disappointment pressing on his chest. Here we go again. The old narrative began forming. You failed. You ruined everything. You're not built for this. But then he remembered something he read in the Japanese teachings. Fall 7 times, stand up 8. A principle so simple, yet so brutally honest. The samurai didn't avoid failure. They expected it and trained for it. The real rule wasn't, never fail. The real rule was, continue anyway, no matter how imperfectly, no matter how slowly, no matter how messy the day had been. So he did something he had never done before. He forgave himself immediately, without negotiation. He took a slow breath. He acknowledged the setback. And then he wrote 2 words in his notebook. Day 48. Not restart. Not begin again. Not back to 0. Just day 48. Because the journey wasn't broken. It was simply tested. He understood something he had never grasped before. Consistency isn't built by perfect days. It's built by imperfect days that don't stop you. For the first time, failure didn't signal the end. It signaled progress. It showed him that discipline wasn't about avoiding mistakes, but about refusing to let a mistake become a collapse. The next morning, his routine felt heavier. He didn't feel proud or inspired, but he showed up anyway. And as he moved through the day, something remarkable happened. The shame faded, the guilt softened, and the rhythm returned. He realized he didn't lose anything during the setback. He gained resilience. He gained proof that he could fall without shattering. This was the real turning point. Not the flawless days, not the strong moments, but the moment he learned the warrior's rule. You continue even when you don't feel worthy of continuing. Kojin, the rebirth of personal identity. By day 60, Something began to change inside him, not in his habits, not in his routines, but in the quiet place where identity lives. The Japanese call this inner rebirth, Kojin, the emergence of a new self, formed through deliberate practice. It is not sudden. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is the slow realization that the man you were is no longer the man you are becoming. He noticed it one morning when he looked in the mirror. Nothing obvious had changed. His face was the same, his body similar, but his presence felt different. His gaze held steadiness. His breath flowed more smoothly. His posture had a quiet strength to it. He didn't look transformed, but he felt transformed. This feeling wasn't pride. It wasn't excitement. It was recognition. Recognition that the person standing before him now was not the same man who began the 100-day journey. For years, he lived as someone he didn't fully respect. Inconsistent, reactive, easily shaken. His identity was tangled in past failures, broken routines, scattered attention, and internal doubt. He carried the weight of those versions of himself everywhere he went. But as the days of disciplined repetition added up, the old identity began dissolving. He wasn't pretending to be someone new. He was becoming someone new. The Japanese believed identity is shaped by one thing above all: repeated action. Not thoughts. Not feelings. Not promises. Actions. And for 60 days, his actions had been different. He woke up with intention. He trained his body gently but consistently. He followed a daily structure he trusted. He acted without overthinking. He recovered from setbacks without collapsing. He took responsibility for his life, day after day. These small, quiet victories built something stronger than motivation, self-respect. He began to feel a sense of dignity returning to him. Not arrogance, not ego, but a deep internal respect for his own effort. Each day completed became a message to his subconscious. I am reliable. I can trust myself. I keep going. This shift created Kojin a rebirth not of personality, but of character. He walked differently. He spoke more clearly. He took action with less hesitation. He no longer felt like a man pretending to change. He felt like a man changing simply by living differently. The most powerful moment came when he realized he no longer feared slipping. He wasn't terrified of losing progress. He no longer viewed setbacks as evidence of weakness. His identity had grown strong enough to hold him steady. Kojin teaches that a new self is formed not when life becomes easier, but when a man becomes stronger. He felt that strength now not as a performance, but as a quiet truth. He had become a different man not because someone told him to, but because he showed up for himself long enough to meet the version he had always hoped to become. The samurai standard: do what must be done. By day 70, the character reached a stage of the journey where comfort no longer guided him. Motivation no longer mattered. Feelings no longer decided his actions. He reached the point every samurai was trained for, the point where duty becomes the guiding force. In Japanese warrior culture, this was known simply as the samurai standard: do what must be done whether you feel like it or not. Samurai didn't ask themselves if they were inspired. They didn't negotiate with their emotions. They didn't wait for clarity or confidence. They acted because action was required. Duty came before preference. Responsibility came before mood. This standard wasn't harshness. It was freedom, the freedom from being controlled by temporary feelings. The character had spent years being pulled around by emotions. If he woke up tired, he gave up. If he felt stressed, he avoided tasks. If he felt overwhelmed, he collapsed into distraction. His life had been shaped by inner impulses rather than inner strength. But now, with 60 days of training behind him, he was ready to meet the samurai standard. It began with a simple mantra he repeated each morning. This must be done. Not, I want to do this. Not, I hope I do this. Not, maybe when I feel better. Just, this must be done. He applied this mindset to everything. His morning ritual happened even when he woke up groggy. His warrior's task was completed even when his mind resisted. His training continued even when his body felt heavy. His daily reflection happened even when he wanted to skip it. There was no debate. No emotional bargaining. No mental story about difficulty. He learned a profound truth the samurai lived by. If you remove the option of escape, you remove 80% of the struggle. Most of his suffering had come not from the tasks themselves, but from the internal war he fought before beginning. Once that war ended, once he embraced duty, the tasks felt lighter, cleaner, simpler. He wasn't harsh with himself. He wasn't punishing himself. He was simply living by a standard that required him to rise. This standard built something stronger than discipline. It built inner steel. Inner steel doesn't shout. It doesn't boast. It doesn't need admiration. It is the quiet force that holds a man steady when his emotions would rather collapse. Around day 75, he realized something remarkable. His excuses were disappearing. Not because he fought them harder, but because they no longer held authority. They were background noise, easily ignored. He didn't need to feel ready. He didn't need to feel strong. He simply needed to take the next action aligned with duty. This was the samurai standard, the rule that turns effort into identity, identity into reliability, and reliability into quiet strength. He had spent years letting emotions dictate his life. Now, for the first time, his actions dictated his emotions. Duty wasn't a burden. It was the path. And he was finally walking it. Physical and mental synchronization. There is a moment in a warrior's training when the body stops resisting and the mind stops wandering. A moment when effort becomes flow and intention becomes movement. The Japanese describe this stage as the synchronization of shin, mind, and tai, body, a harmony that creates steadiness, presence, and quiet discipline. By day 80, the character began to feel this alignment for the first time in his life. It didn't happen during a dramatic workout or a moment of inspiration. It happened during something ordinary, his daily training ritual. As he moved through his exercises, he noticed his breath matching his pace. His thoughts didn't drift into worry or anticipation. His body didn't feel heavy or resistant. Instead, each movement felt connected to his mind, as if there was no separation between intention and action. His body wasn't lagging behind his thoughts or fighting against them. It was cooperating, supporting, reinforcing. This synchronization felt unfamiliar, yet comforting, like remembering a natural rhythm he had forgotten. For most of his life, his mind and body lived in conflict. His mind wanted discipline, but his body resisted. His body wanted rest, but his mind punished itself for slowing down. His thoughts moved faster than his breath. His habits moved slower than his intentions. He lived split between the person he wanted to be and the person he felt capable of being. But after 80 days of consistent structure, repetition, and discipline, the divide began to close. The body learned to trust the mind. The mind learned to respect the body. Both began working together instead of pulling in opposite directions. He noticed this alignment throughout the day. When he walked, his posture was upright but relaxed. When he breathed, it was naturally deep. When he worked, his focus held steady. When he rested, he truly rested without guilt or distraction. This was not the dramatic motivation he once chased. It was steadiness, the quiet core of discipline. In Japanese martial arts, masters often say, "When the mind settles, the body organizes itself." The character understood this now. His thoughts no longer raced ahead of him. His body no longer lagged behind. They met in the present moment, a place he used to visit rarely, but now lived in more often. This synchronization created something powerful: inner alignment. Alignment made decisions easier. Alignment made discipline smoother. Alignment made the day feel coherent instead of chaotic. He no longer felt torn between desire and action, intention and execution, thought and movement. He became stable, not rigid, not tense. Stable, grounded like a tree with deep roots, flexible enough to bend, strong enough to withstand wind. This stability gave him a sense of quiet pride. He no longer needed external validation. His confidence didn't come from achievements or compliments. It came from the harmony inside him, the feeling that he could rely on himself, mentally and physically. For the first time, he wasn't forcing discipline or fighting inertia. He was simply living it. This was the essence of Phase 4. A man whose mind and body move as one cannot be easily shaken. The arrival of internal silence. By day 80, something profound began to unfold inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Not motivation, not confidence, not excitement. Something quieter, deeper, more transformative. Silence. Real silence. Internal silence. The kind of silence that doesn't depend on a quiet room, but emerges from a quiet mind. It came slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a fog lifting at dawn. One morning, during his Chorei ritual, he noticed that the usual rush of thoughts was weaker. Normally, his mind would bombard him with plans, worries, reminders, and fragments of old conversations. But on this morning, the thoughts approached softly, without pressure, without force. For the first time, they felt optional. This was new. This was rare. This was the beginning of the deep calm Japanese masters spoke about, the mind returning to its natural state. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt spacious, as if something inside him had unclenched, as if the tension he'd carried for years was finally loosening, as if the center of his mind had stopped spinning. He sat longer that morning, not out of discipline, but because the stillness felt good, relieving, grounding, nourishing. He didn't try to meditate. He simply allowed himself to exist without chasing any thought. The silence supported him. It held him gently, like a quiet hand on the shoulder. Throughout the day, the internal calm followed him. Conversations didn't drain him. Deadlines didn't tighten his chest. Small frustrations didn't pull him into spirals. Distractions appeared, but lost their grip instantly. He wasn't suppressing emotion. He wasn't avoiding stress. He wasn't forcing peace. He was experiencing peace, real peace, for the first time in a long time. In Japanese Zen, this stage is described as seijaku, tranquility born from alignment, not escape. It is the calm that comes after the storm inside has exhausted itself. It is the silence that appears when a man finally stops fighting his own mind. The character felt this deeply. His breath moved differently, slower, fuller. His senses sharpened, he noticed details he used to miss. His posture reflected his inner calm, steady, grounded, fluid. His thoughts had not disappeared, but they no longer arrived with the force of command. They passed through gently, like ripples in a still pond. He realized something profound. Silence is not the absence of thoughts. It is the absence of inner resistance. For years, he resisted everything: stress, discomfort, boredom, fear. The resistance created noise. Now, because he had stopped fighting and started observing, the noise began to fade. And as it faded, something beautiful emerged. A quiet confidence, a steady presence, a deeper connection to himself. This internal silence wasn't a destination, it was a sign. A sign that the layers of chaos were peeling away, revealing the calm center that had been waiting underneath. He had entered the deepest part of the journey, where the mind becomes still, and the man begins to truly see himself. Japanese mono no aware, the beauty of discipline. There is a feeling in Japanese culture so gentle, so subtle, yet so deeply moving that it shapes the way their masters approached life. This feeling is mono no aware, the quiet appreciation of moments that are fleeting, delicate, and meaningful, precisely because they do not last. It is the emotion of watching cherry blossoms fall, not with sadness, but with gratitude for their brief existence. By day 85, the character began to feel this same emotion toward his discipline. He used to see discipline as pressure, something hard, demanding, uncomfortable, a burden he carried on his shoulders. But as his mind quieted and his days became structured, something shifted. He began to appreciate the beauty hidden inside discipline. Not the outcome, not the transformation, but the simple act of showing up. One evening, after completing his daily reflection, he looked at the small notebook he used to track his progress. The pages were not perfect. Some days had messy handwriting. Some had doubts scribbled in the margins. Some had marks of fatigue. But together, they formed a pattern of effort, of sincerity, of a man trying. And something about that moved him. His discipline had become beautiful because it was fragile, fleeting, and honest. Mono no, aware, teaches that things are precious not because they last forever, but because they don't. Every disciplined day he lived would pass. Every moment of stillness would fade. Every breath, every step, every small action would dissolve into time. But in their brief existence, they held meaning, the kind of meaning that shapes a man quietly from within. He began noticing beauty in the simplest rituals, the way his breath softened during morning stillness, the way his body warmed during training, the way the room felt after he organized it, the way his mind felt spacious after releasing a thought. These were ordinary moments, yet they felt extraordinary because he was present for them. He wasn't rushing through discipline. He wasn't performing it for results. He was experiencing it, feeling it, living it. For years, he had been blind to the beauty of his own effort. Mono no, aware, opened his eyes. He saw that every moment of discipline carried a quiet tenderness, a quiet fragility. Even the hard days, especially the hard days, held a kind of emotional softness. The struggle was beautiful because it meant he was still trying. The repetition was beautiful because it meant he still believed in himself. The consistency was beautiful because it meant he had not given up. Discipline wasn't a punishment. It was an expression of care. Care for his mind. Care for his body. Care for his future. Care for the man he was becoming. The Japanese understood that beauty and discipline are not separate. Beauty is found in the way discipline shapes a moment, the way it slows time, the way it reveals who we are beneath distraction. By embracing mono no aware, the character no longer saw discipline as something to endure. He saw it as something to appreciate, a fleeting, delicate, meaningful part of his life. And in appreciating it, he found a deeper reason to continue. The character becomes unrecognizable. By day 90, the character did not realize how much he had changed, not until life reflected it back to him. His transformation wasn't loud. He hadn't become a different person overnight. But slowly, through discipline, stillness, repetition, and internal alignment, something fundamental had shifted. He had become unrecognizable, not in the way he looked, but in the way he felt. It began with his presence. People around him started to respond differently. Conversations felt smoother. Strangers treated him with a quiet respect he had never experienced before. His presence carried a groundedness, a subtle weight, not from force, but from calm. He no longer entered rooms with anxious energy. He walked into them with a sense of being exactly where he needed to be. Presence is invisible to the eye, but unmistakable to the nervous system. And his presence now communicated something simple and undeniable. This man is steady. Then came his posture. It was no longer slumped or tense. His shoulders rested naturally, neither pushed back in forced confidence, nor curved forward in quiet defeat. His head aligned with his spine, his movements fluid and deliberate. It wasn't an act. His posture wasn't a pose. It was the physical expression of inner order. When the mind calms, the body organizes itself, and his body now reflected a man who lived with intention instead of reaction. His breathing changed as well. For years, his breath had been shallow, quick, and reactive, the breath of someone constantly overwhelmed. But now, his breath flowed with depth, ease, and rhythm. Difficult conversations no longer tightened his chest. Stress no longer hijacked his lungs. His breathing became a quiet anchor, pulling him back into the present whenever life tried to pull him away. This alone made him feel like a different person, someone grounded, someone centered, someone in control. But the most powerful transformation was his energy. He used to carry frantic, scattered, inconsistent energy. Now, he carried slow, deliberate, attentive energy. The kind of energy people feel even before he speaks. The kind of energy that makes others relax in his presence. He didn't force this. He didn't chase it. It emerged naturally from the stillness he cultivated, the discipline he practiced, and the identity he rebuilt. His energy no longer leaked. It no longer scattered. It no longer fluctuated wildly. It gathered inside him like a slow-burning flame. He began noticing something else. He trusted himself in a way he never did before. He trusted his thoughts, his decisions, his habits, his reactions. Doubt no longer dictated his days. Fear no longer shaped his identity. Confusion no longer drained him. His inner world had structure now. And that structure made him someone solid. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't finished. But he was undeniably different. The man who started this journey was overwhelmed, inconsistent, anxious, and lost. The man standing here now was stable, calm, grounded, and quietly powerful. His transformation wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about uncovering who he was always meant to be. And now, on the edge of the final 10 days, he understood that the real challenge was no longer becoming the man, but living as him. The final push toward mastery. The final 10 days of the 100-day journey feel different from everything that came before. Not because they are harder, but because they are clearer. By day 90, the character wasn't the same man who began this path. His mind was quieter. His body was steadier. His habits were rooted. His identity had shifted. And yet, the last days mattered more than all the others, not because they would complete him, but because they would confirm him. Japanese masters believed the final stretch of any training cycle revealed who a man had truly become. Not on day 1, when everything is new. Not on day 30, when discipline is still unstable. Not even on day 60, when identity begins to reform. But at the very end, when endurance meets clarity, this final phase is not about adding effort. It is about deepening presence. The character understood this intuitively. He no longer felt frantic about improvement. He wasn't chasing motivation. He wasn't trying to prove himself through dramatic effort. Instead, he felt a quiet sense of responsibility, an inner knowing that the last 10 days would solidify everything he had built. He woke up on day 91 with a feeling he couldn't quite describe, a mixture of calm, anticipation, and gratitude. He performed Shōrei with more sincerity than ever. His breath felt deeper. His intention felt clearer. His mind didn't wander. His body didn't resist. It wasn't discipline anymore. It was identity. The Japanese called the final stretch Shujo no Maki, the last chapter of training. A chapter where a man polishes what he has learned, sharpens what he has built, and releases what he no longer needs. It is not about pushing harder. It is about finishing cleanly, deliberately, and with dignity. The character understood that the final days were about refinement. Refining his presence, so he lived in the moment rather than in his thoughts. Refining his habits, not by expanding them but by strengthening their roots. Refining his breathing, turning it into a constant source of stability. Refining his identity, accepting fully the man he had become. Nothing new was required. Only depth. Walking through his day, he noticed the world differently. Sounds were clearer. Movement was smoother. Conversations were easier. The small things that once irritated him felt insignificant. His internal silence remained steady even in stressful moments. He wasn't fighting himself anymore, he was guiding himself. The final push wasn't about grinding. It was about honoring. Honoring the work he had done. honoring the discipline he had built, honoring the version of himself that had emerged. These last 10 days were the final thread that wove everything together, the moment when temporary habits became permanent traits, when fragile discipline became solid identity, when the journey became part of him. By day 95, he realized something profound. He was no longer finishing a challenge. He was stepping into a new life. This final push wasn't about reaching mastery. It was about recognizing that mastery had already begun. The return of obstacles. Life has a way of testing a man precisely when he starts to rise. Not out of cruelty, but out of truth. Growth must be challenged to be proven. And around day 95, just when the character felt calm, steady, and aligned, the world pushed back. It began subtly, a stressful message, a sudden change at work, a moment of tension with someone close to him. Then, more followed. Unexpected responsibilities piled up. Plans collapsed. People demanded his attention. The smooth rhythm he had built began to strain. In the past, this kind of chaos would have overwhelmed him instantly. It always had. Whenever life pushed, he collapsed. Whenever stress surged, he broke. But this time was different, not because the obstacles were smaller, but because he was stronger. The first shock came when an urgent problem at work forced him to cancel part of his daily structure. His old mind would have panicked, spiraled, or tried to escape. But instead, he took a slow breath, grounded himself, and handled the situation one step at a time. His breath stayed steady. His thoughts stayed clear. His emotions rose, but didn't take control. The world was loud, but he was quiet. Later in the week, an unexpected issue with a friend stirred emotional discomfort. In the past, he would have reacted impulsively or withdrawn completely. But now, he responded with calm presence. He listened. He didn't take things personally. He didn't lose himself in the tension. His identity held steady, like a rock in the middle of a rushing stream. Even his body responded differently. There was no panic tightening his chest, no restlessness pushing him to escape, no collapse into distraction. The synchronization he built between mind and body allowed him to move through stress rather than drown in it. This was resilience, not the loud, heroic kind, but the quiet, stable kind the Japanese revered. Life was testing him, and he was not breaking. He still felt pressure. He still felt discomfort. But he didn't confuse those feelings with failure. He understood something he never understood before. Obstacles don't reset the journey, they reveal the transformation. Every challenge became proof of how far he had come. When frustration rose, he returned to his breath. When chaos hit, he returned to stillness. When stress pulled, he returned to presence. When the unexpected disrupted his structure, he adjusted without collapsing. He learned the warrior's truth. Resilience is not the absence of difficulty. It is the ability to remain yourself in the middle of difficulty. By day 98, he realized the obstacles were not setbacks. They were confirmations. They showed that his discipline was no longer fragile, no longer dependent on perfect conditions. He wasn't a man who followed a routine only when life was easy. He was a man who stood firm even when life demanded more. The obstacles didn't weaken him. They revealed the strength he had quietly built. The 100th day. The 100th day didn't arrive with fireworks. It didn't feel like a finish line. It didn't feel like a dramatic triumph or a grand moment of achievement. It arrived quietly, just like the transformation itself. When the character opened his eyes that morning, he didn't feel a surge of excitement. He felt something far more meaningful. Peace. A deep, steady peace that settled through his chest like warm light. For the first time in years, he woke without dread, without chaos, without the heaviness that once greeted him every morning. There was no internal noise demanding his attention, no tension tightening his breath, no panic pushing him forward. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that only comes from a long journey well traveled. He moved into his final chore ritual with a sense of reverence. The cold water on his face felt symbolic, like washing away the last traces of the man he used to be. His breath flowed effortlessly, grounding him. His thoughts floated softly, without pressure. His intention for the day emerged naturally. Thank you. Not, I did it. Not, I am strong. Just, thank you. Thank you to the journey. Thank you to the process. Thank you to the version of himself who refused to give up. As he moved through the morning, every step felt different, not because he was transformed today, but because he had been transforming for 100 days. His discipline wasn't effort anymore. It was expression. His habits weren't forced anymore. They were familiar. His presence wasn't practiced anymore. It was embodied. He looked around his room, the cleaner desk, the organized spaces, the notebook filled with days of effort. Each mark, each page, each written intention was proof of quiet progress. None of it was perfect, but all of it was real. And that was enough. Later in the day, he reflected on his journey. There were moments when he nearly broke. Days when he didn't believe in himself. Times when old patterns tried to pull him back. But he had continued. And in continuing, he discovered the truth of Japanese discipline. Transformation is not a moment. It is a rhythm. The 100th day wasn't a peak. It was a point of clarity. A realization that he had stopped trying to become someone and had become him. There was no ego in this. No grand narrative. No need to announce anything to the world. His victory was internal, felt in the way he breathed, the way he stood, the way he moved through the day with quiet certainty. As the sun set, he didn't feel like he had reached the end of something. He felt like he had finally returned home to himself. The 100th day wasn't a finish line. It was a doorway. A doorway into a life where discipline wasn't a battle, presence wasn't a struggle, and identity wasn't a question. He had rebuilt himself. Not loudly, not perfectly, but peacefully. And that peace was his true accomplishment. Kaizen. Micro-improvement as a lifestyle. After completing the 100-day journey, the character realized something essential. His transformation was not created by big, dramatic efforts. It wasn't created by intensity, motivation, or sudden bursts of energy. It emerged through something far quieter. Something the Japanese built entire philosophies around Kaizen. The practice of slow, continuous, micro-improvement. Kaizen teaches a simple truth. If you improve your life by just 1% each day, the evolution becomes unstoppable. Not loud, not overwhelming, not exhausting, just steady. For men who fear burnout. Men who have tried and failed with intense routines, strict challenges, and unsustainable discipline. Kaizen is a relief. It removes the pressure to change everything at once. It replaces force with patience. It replaces intensity with consistency. And it replaces the impossible goal of perfection with the achievable goal of slightly better than yesterday. The character saw this clearly when he looked back at his own transformation. He didn't leap from chaos to discipline overnight. He didn't conquer his mind in a single moment. He didn't reclaim his identity through massive action. His life changed because he took small steps. Tiny habits, quiet rituals, simple choices, repeated for 100 days. A few minutes of breath work. A few pages in his notebook. A few moments of presence. A few disciplined actions. A few avoided temptations. Each one felt insignificant on its own. But together, they rebuilt him. Kaizen thrives on this subtlety. It teaches that growth is not a straight line. It is a gentle, upward curve, created by decisions so small, they seem invisible at first. This philosophy removes the pressure that destroys most modern men, the pressure to be exceptional instantly. Instead, it invites them into a way of life, powered by calm progress. The character began living in this new rhythm naturally. He didn't need the structure of the 100 days to guide him anymore. The structure had become part of him. When he felt tired, he didn't aim to do everything, he aimed to do something. When he felt overwhelmed, he didn't try to solve it all, he took one steady breath. When he felt unfocused, he didn't chase motivation, he returned to one simple action. Kaizen taught him that the smallest act of discipline is still discipline. The smallest moment of presence is still presence. The smallest step forward is still forward. This removed fear. This removed pressure. This removed the weight that once made him quit. The Japanese used Kaizen to master crafts, build companies, raise warriors, and cultivate character not through force, but through gentle, continuous refinement. The character felt this truth deeply. He no longer needed big transformations. He needed small, steady growth. Kaizen didn't just change how he lived. It changed how he thought about living. He no longer measured progress by speed or intensity. He measured it by direction. And as long as he continued moving forward, even 1% at a time, he knew he would never return to the man he once was. Rewiring identity through repetition. Most men believe identity changes through insight, through a breakthrough, a realization, a sudden surge of motivation. But the character's journey revealed a deeper truth. Identity changes through repetition. Not repetition of thought. Repetition of action. By day 100, he understood something he never knew before. The mind does not believe what you say. The mind believes what you do. Every repeated action becomes a message to the nervous system, a vote for the man you are becoming, a quiet restructuring of the patterns that once controlled you. In the beginning of his journey, his mind had no reason to trust him. For years, his actions had communicated unreliability. Promises broken, routines abandoned, goals postponed, intentions made but never lived. Each of these repeated patterns reinforced an identity of inconsistency. Not because he wanted that identity, but because repetition carved it into him. The Japanese understood this deeply. Their philosophy was simple. Reef. You become what you practice. A samurai didn't try to feel like a warrior. He practiced the actions of a warrior until the identity formed naturally. And that's exactly what happened to the character. Day after day, repetition reshaped him. The repetition of waking early told his mind, I lead my life. The repetition of breathwork told his body, we are safe. The repetition of focused tasks told his brain, we follow through. The repetition of evening reflection told his emotions, we process instead of escape. These weren't dramatic actions. They were small, quiet, almost ordinary. But repetition does something extraordinary. It rewires the pathways of behavior, emotion, and identity. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity. Identity psychology calls it self-schema reconstruction. The Japanese simply called it Keiko disciplined practice, shaping the self. By repeating disciplined actions, his brain slowly replaced old neural patterns. The pattern of hesitation was replaced by the pattern of starting. The pattern of quitting was replaced by the pattern of continuing. The pattern of avoidance was replaced by the pattern of presence. The pattern of self-doubt was replaced by the pattern of self-respect. His emotional patterns changed too. Where he once felt overwhelmed, he now felt steady. Where he once felt scattered, he now felt centered. Where he once felt weak, he now felt capable. Not because he forced these feelings, but because repetition created them. Identity didn't shift on day one. It didn't shift through inspiration. It shifted through evidence. Evidence built one quiet day at a time. He realized he no longer needed to convince himself he was disciplined. He was disciplined. He no longer needed to pretend he was calm. He was calm. He no longer needed to imagine being the man he wanted to be. He had become him through repetition. Identity is not a dream. Identity is a habit. And repetition, done with intention, reshapes every part of a man. His thoughts, his emotions, his actions, and finally, the way he sees himself. He didn't talk himself into a new identity. He earned it. One repetition at a time. The Japanese rebuild formula. After 100 days of discipline, stillness, structure, and inner alignment, the character finally understood something that had been invisible to him at the start. His transformation wasn't an accident. It wasn't luck. It wasn't temporary motivation. It was the result of a clear, repeatable formula, a system the Japanese had refined for centuries. This formula wasn't complicated. It wasn't intense. It wasn't overwhelming. But it was powerful because it addressed the mind, body, and identity together. The system could be divided into 5 essential steps. 1. Subtraction, before addition. Days 110. The Japanese begin transformation by removing what weakens you. Noise, distractions, clutter, overstimulation. Not because these things are bad, but because they scatter the mind. The character's first step was clearing space mentally, emotionally, and physically. Without subtraction, no new discipline can survive. This is why the journey starts with emptiness. 2. Create a steady daily structure. Days 10:30. Monks, samurai, craftsmen, all lived by stable rhythms. The character followed this too. Morning ritual. 1 focused task. Evening reflection. Not strict, not overwhelming, just simple and repeatable. Structure removes decision fatigue. Structure ends inconsistency. Structure supports discipline even when motivation is gone. This is the backbone of the formula. 3. Repetition, over intensity. Days 30-60. The middle grind is where most men quit. But Japanese mastery relies on kurikayeshi repetition. Small actions performed daily. No rush, no pressure, no looking for novelty. Repetition builds identity. Identity builds discipline. Discipline builds transformation. The character grew through ordinary days, not extraordinary ones. 4. Align mind, technique, and body. Days 60-80. Shin, gi, tai. Mind, technique, body. All moving together. This stage created inner harmony for the character. A calm mind, a precise structure, and a steady body. When these 3 align, discipline becomes natural instead of forced. This is when he first felt like a different man. 5. Refine. Through calm presence. Days 80, 100. The final stage is not intensity, it is refinement. Seijaku, internal silence. Mono no, aware appreciating the beauty of effort. Zanshin, staying present even as the journey nears completion. Obstacles returned, but he remained grounded. Pressure rose, but he stayed centered. Life pushed, but he stood firm. This final phase confirmed his transformation. The formula is simple. 1. Remove noise. 2. Build structure. 3. Repeat small actions. 4. Unify mind and body. 5. Refine through presence. Anyone can follow it. Anyone can repeat it. Anyone can rebuild a life with it. The character realized this wasn't just a 100-day journey. It was a blueprint, a system he could return to whenever life drifted off course. A system he could use to rebuild any part of himself, anytime. The Japanese rebuild formula didn't give him a new life. It gave him the power to continually create one. The man who no longer breaks. There is a moment in a man's life when he realizes he no longer crumbles under pressure. Not because life has become easier, but because he has become different, stronger, steadier, quieter inside. By the time the character entered the days after the 100-day journey, he discovered that he had become something he never imagined possible. A man who no longer breaks. This didn't mean he never felt stress. It didn't mean he stopped making mistakes. It didn't mean he was immune to fear or emotion. It meant he had learned how to stay himself even in the middle of difficulty. The first test of this new strength came sooner than expected. A sudden problem at work demanded his attention. People were panicking. Deadlines were collapsing. The old him would have spiraled, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility. But now, his breath stayed steady. His mind stayed quiet. He didn't rush. He didn't freeze. He simply took action. One step at a time. Grounded in the calm center, he had spent 100 days building. This was the new strength. Not force, not aggression, but inner stability. His emotional resilience had transformed. Where anxiety once surged, presence flowed instead. Where self-doubt once echoed, clarity rose. Where avoidance once controlled him, responsibility guided him. He noticed that even his reactions were different. Problems no longer felt like threats, they felt like tasks. Chaos no longer felt personal, it felt solvable. Pressure no longer crushed him, it shaped him. This shift wasn't about becoming fearless. It was about becoming unshakable. The Japanese often describe inner strength as the ability to remain centered while the world moves around you. Not rigid, not stubborn-centered. The character embodied this now. He moved through life with a steadiness that others could feel simply by being near him. His presence calmed tense rooms. His tone grounded conversations. His posture signaled a man who trusted himself. He didn't need validation. He didn't need external proof. The proof lived inside him in the way his nervous system reacted. Every challenge he faced became confirmation. He no longer cracked in the places he once broke. Small frustrations couldn't derail him. Unexpected events couldn't overwhelm him. Old demons of overthinking and avoidance couldn't pull him back. He had built a new internal architecture, one made of presence, discipline, and self-respect. The greatest realization came one night as he sat quietly in his room. He reflected not on what he accomplished, but on what he didn't lose. He didn't lose himself. When life tested him, he didn't collapse under old habits. He didn't drown in noise. He didn't return to the man he once feared he would always be. He had become the kind of man who bends, but does not break. Not because he is perfect, not because he is fearless, but because he is whole. And wholeness, not strength, is what truly makes a man unbreakable. The return to the world with a warrior mind. Returning to the world after a long journey of discipline feels different. The world hasn't changed the noise, the responsibilities, the expectations, and the distractions are all still there. But he has changed. And because he has changed, the world now responds to him differently. By the time the character stepped back into the rhythm of everyday life, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knows who he is and how to move through the world without losing himself. This was the true test of his transformation, not whether he could maintain discipline in controlled conditions, but whether he could live with presence while surrounded by chaos again. He returned to work with a new energy. Not aggressive, not overly serious, just calm and grounded. Meetings that once overwhelmed him now felt manageable. He listened without overthinking. He spoke without rushing. He handled problems without absorbing the emotional weight of everyone around him. His mind didn't scatter. His breath stayed steady. His decisions landed with clarity. He wasn't performing confidence. His presence was confidence. The people around him noticed before he did. Some said he seemed more focused. Others said he seemed calmer. A few couldn't describe it, but they felt it. This is the effect of a warrior mind. It communicates silently. At home, he approached responsibilities differently. He didn't procrastinate. He didn't avoid tasks. He didn't collapse onto the couch out of mental exhaustion. He moved intentionally, completing small tasks with a gentle rhythm. Washing dishes became a moment of presence. Cleaning his space became a grounding ritual. Even simple routines like preparing food or organizing his belongings felt meaningful. Discipline had become part of him. Not as pressure, but as care. Old triggers returned too, but they no longer pulled him into the chaos they once did. Moments that used to provoke anxiety now inspired awareness. Situations that once created frustration now became opportunities to breathe and realign. He didn't suppress emotion. He responded to it differently. That was the real transformation. The world stayed the same, but he no longer reacted the same. He also noticed something unexpected: he had more time. Not because the days magically expanded, but because he no longer wasted energy on overthinking, avoidance, or emotional confusion. His mind wasn't leaking energy. His body wasn't fighting itself. His habits didn't require effort. Everything flowed with the natural rhythm he had built. He realized the warrior mind wasn't about intensity or aggression. It was about clarity, presence, discipline without force, action without hesitation, emotion without chaos. It was the ability to move through life's responsibilities without being crushed by them. As he walked through daily life, he carried a quiet truth. He didn't return to the world as the same man. He returned as someone capable, someone centered, someone reliable, someone who could face life's uncertainties without losing himself. The warrior mind wasn't something he practiced anymore. It was who he had become. Your own 100-day transformation begins here. As his journey came to an end, a quiet realization settled in his chest. The 100 days were never just about him. They were proof, living proof, that a man can rebuild himself from the inside out, no matter how lost he feels, no matter how far he has drifted, no matter how many times he has broken his own promises. And now, as his story closes, another story begins. Yours. You don't need confidence to start. You don't need perfect discipline. You don't need a plan that impresses anyone. You only need what he had on his first day: a quiet willingness to try. Because transformation doesn't demand strength. It creates strength. The 100-day journey is not a challenge. It is not a trend. It is not a test of willpower. It is a return. A return to yourself, to your presence, to your dignity, to the man you were always meant to be. If you feel overwhelmed, good. That means you're standing at the threshold of change. If you feel doubt, good. That means you're human. If you feel a spark while listening to this, good. That means something inside you is ready. The character began with fear. And so will you. Fear does not stop the journey. It simply walks beside you during the first few steps. Your own transformation will not look like his. Your days will be different. Your struggles will be different. Your victories will be different. But the principles, the timeless Japanese systems will guide you with the same quiet power. Remove what weakens you. Build a simple structure. Repeat small actions. Unify your mind and body. Move through life with calm presence. These are not rules. They are anchors that will hold you steady when life becomes chaotic again. Imagine what 100 days could do for you. Your mornings becoming peaceful instead of frantic. Your mind becoming clear instead of scattered. Your actions becoming consistent instead of unpredictable. Your habits becoming identity instead of effort. Your emotions becoming steady instead of overwhelming. Your presence becoming grounded instead of fragile. Even if you don't believe it yet. Even if part of you whispers, "You can't," there is another part, quieter, deeper, older, that knows you can. The part that has been waiting for you to return. You don't start because you feel ready. You start so that one day, you become ready. And if you choose to begin, if you choose to take that first quiet step, you will discover what he discovered. The man you want to be is not far away. He is one day of discipline away. Then another. Then another. Repeated until the days themselves shape you. This is your moment. Not to dream. Not to plan. But to begin. Your 100-day transformation begins the moment you decide it does. And that moment could be now.